Hello, welcome to this demo on different ways to retouch. Now, there's a lot of different ways to retouch images, and you may know some already, or you may have seen some other tutorials. So we're just going to go through a couple basic different functions. We're just touching things, and then you'll have opportunity to try them out. So definitely feel free to pause the video as you go on. Written directions are also on Canvas. So you'll start off there is a zip file on Canvas for the the Retouching Demo page module page. And you'll download that, and everything actually has a specific name. So the names correspond with what we're doing to make it pretty easy. And just so you know, you'll be saving PSDs along with the JPEGs for everything that you're doing, so that we can look at your process, so I can see what you did. In case something didn't quite work out, I'm able to kind of see what you did and kind of make adjustments and give you proper feedback. So once you've downloaded everything, we're going to open up the Content Aware Fill JPEG. Now the image in the PDF is actually different than the one we have, so keep that in mind. And I'm actually going to show two ways, because I'm using Creative Cloud 2019, which has a different new function. And this one's a little more different because we're going to try everything non-destructive. We never want to permanently edit pixels, because if you save something and close it and bring it back, and you want to fix it even more, if you've already kind of destructively edited your pixels, you can never go back, and that could be very troublesome. So we're going to have our file, and it's the stop sign in the corner and with this wall. Now our goal is to remove this sort of rope hose thing. And what we're going to use is Photoshop can do different retouching elements, and it's very smart where it can give an estimate to what we're doing. So what we're going to do is we're going to do a copy of this layer, so you can kind of click this background layer and drag it to the new page icon, or just do a Command J, which is the keyboard shortcut, Control J if you're on a PC. So next we're going to take the lasso tool, keyboard shortcut L, or you can find the lasso selection tool from your toolbar. It's the third one down. You can also use the polygonal lasso tool with the magnetic, but the regular lasso tool is fine. The accuracy isn't really quite what you need. We just need a section. And if you haven't looked at selection tools, definitely look at selection tools. We're not going to heavily focus on different aspects of Photoshop. We're kind of gearing everything towards photography in this class. So with the selection tool, the lasso tool, we're just going to make a selection out around this rope. We'll talk about different types of selections, whether or not you want to do them big or not. So it doesn't have to be pretty or close. It could be kind of loose. So what we're going to do is, you see this selection, these marching ants around it. And that's how you know you have a selection. You're going to right click it within the selection, and you can open up this dialog box. And we're going to go to Fill. It's going to open up another dialog box, and we're going to make sure the contents say Content Aware. We're going to click Color Adaptation and leave the rest of this fine. And we're going to click OK. And what it's doing, it's reading everything else in the scene and making an estimate on what that fill would be. Now what we're going to do, with the marching ants still going, is do a Command J. And what that does is it literally just makes a copy within the selection. It's what you would do for a new layer, but if you have a selection within marching ants, it will only make a copy within a selection. And we can delete this background copy layer. So if you toggle on and off, you have your selection. And this isn't absolutely accurate. It's kind of not that great. There's a lot of different textures that Photoshop had to do an estimate for. This would be fine to File, Save As, and you want to put it in your folder, and you would name things as your name, first name, last name, dash content aware fill, and you want to save this as a PSD because we need to see those layers. Hit save, and then we'll do a file, save as for the JPEG. Now if you're using 2019, I'm going to show you an extra step. So I'm going to toggle off my visibility for layer 1, which is the one I made the adjustments for. Command J on that background layer and make that selection for the rope again. And we're going to go actually to Edit. You're going to scroll down. There's content aware scale. Content aware fill. It's in the center. This is with 2019, and this is pulls up a program within a program. This will look familiar if you've done masking a little bit more in depth. So what this does is it reads this, and it kind of makes the estimate. It kind of gives you a little bit more information on how it works. So you can play around with these fill settings, but anywhere that's green is where it's going to sample and kind of give an estimate for. So you may kind of erase more complicated things that you don't think it should read from, and it gives you kind of a preview. So it's actually cleaning up quite nice. And I may take that selection tool. Now this is only selected. This is add to, subtract. So I may actually subtract part of that sign, go back to that brush, and if it's negative, it doesn't want to select, and make sure I don't get any of that stop sign because it's kind of blending there. As you can see, it's kind of becoming a little bit closer to what I want, and I may just kind of clean up a bit more. And this is really just saying anywhere that's in that color says that's where it's sampling. And this is kind of a smarter way to do it. And you can actually change your output. So instead of doing that destructive way, you can output to a new layer without doing those destructive edits. I'm going to do a Command D to deselect. And as you can see, this actually did a pretty decent job. Now, this is fine, but if you're using 2019, you actually have those additional functions, and that might be something to play around, and even play around with your other files. So I'll just save this as a JPEG, format from PSD to JPEG. I'm going to overwrite that file because I like the new one I made better. And that's the content aware fill. And it's kind of reading whatever's around the scene. Now, this one was a little bit more difficult because there's all those textures. The next one we're going to do is we're going to keep going with the content aware theme, but we're going to do the content aware move tool. So we're going to go open up Content Aware Move 1 JPEG. Alright, so we have this scene, and what we want to do is take this contrail is what they're called, and we want to move it elsewhere. So what we're going to do is, the first thing we're going to do is make a new layer. And we are going to open up the Content Aware Move tool. So if you kind of look down, it's over here, and it's kind of those two arrows that go in the opposite way. And we're going to look at our control panel. We want to change the mode to move. We want to make this structure to 6. And we want to take the color to 5. Now the structure and color have two different functions. So the structure, it specifies how closely the patch should reflect the existing image patterns. So if we enter 7, which is the highest we'll go, it will adhere very strongly to existing image patterns, and 1 very loosely. Color, so it's how it's going to blend. Definitely play with these settings. And we want to make sure we're toggling on sample on layer. So it's going to take everything from top down so we can work non-destructively. So we're going to take this and we're going to just kind of draw an outline of the trail, and we're just going to click and move. And we're just going to move it to elsewhere in the scene. And what it's going to do, it's going to take that element, we're going to move it, and it's going to blend it in the new selection and kind of patch where we're going. Now it's a little bit, as you can see, it took a little bit too much there. So I'm going to delete that layer and try again. And we're just going to go a little bit closer. This one's a little bit tricky, but you want to try to see the best you can if you can move it to kind of where it will kind of blend it a bit more. You might need to make the selection a bit wider. So we'll even go nice and wide. And to go back, I just did a Command Z, which always takes you back a step. And that one looks good. A Command D to deselect, so it kind of did a nice patch there. Not the best, but it does a lot of good work. So we're going to go to File, Save As, first name, last name. Make sure we're in the correct folder. Save as that PSD. We want to make sure we can check those layers. And we'll save it as a JPEG. Alright, so the next one to look at is Content Aware Move 2. So we have this scene, and what we want to do is take one part of the scene and move it without deleting it. We want to blend it. So we want to make this whole scene go from a little bit of greenery to all covered with sort of this shrubbery. So we're going to create a new layer, because we're going to work non-destructively, and we're still using the Content Aware Move tool, but instead of going to Move, we're going to go to Extend, and we're going to take 3 for structures and 3 for color. And to sample all layers, and you can make even like teensy tiny edits, select and move, and it's going to blend it very nicely. So we're just going to take quite a bit, select, move, and it's just going to transform it to where we go. And blend nicely. And you see, I'm not being really accurate, I'm just kind of having some nice blending, and it's really just kind of guessing. And see, it's starting to look really nice. I'll show you another thing. If we click Transform on Drop, so we'll actually pull into a free transform, and you can kind of scale it up. Again, this is dragging pixels. But it kind of blends. Now, when you're making it much larger, it's not quite the best. And we just want to fill this whole area. And once you're happy with all of your edits, you can even toggle down. Remember, we worked non-destructively to create our new scene, and we'll file, save as, you guessed it, first name, last name, dash, content aware move tool to as PSD and as JPEG. The next we're doing the spot healing brush. So we have this, and we're going to quickly remove blemishes and other imperfections, and it's kind of similar to the healing brush, which we'll get to in a moment, but this was kind of another way. So what we're going to do is create a brand new layer, and we'll take the spot healing brush, which is right here. It's got the little band-aid with the little dots around, and it works with using like a brush. Now we have some options in our control panel. So you have proximity match, which uses pixels around the edge to find the selection to use as a patch. Create texture, which uses pixels in the selection to create a texture. If the texture doesn't work, try dragging through the area a second time. Content aware compares nearby image content to seamlessly fill selection, realistically maintaining key details such as shadows and object edges. So there's different types that we can use. And I want you to kind of play around. I might go with proximity match. Make sure sample all layers. This is when we're using pressure for size, so if you're using a drawing tablet, this is helpful. But if you're not using a drawing tablet, you don't need to. And we can make adjustments here. Now, you also may want to play with your brush. I like doing a brush with a lower hardness. That means the edges are softer. And play around with the brushes with your left and right brackets. These are the hard edge brackets, not the curly brackets, to do so. And this really requires you to zoom in. Using my hand to kind of navigate. J is my keyboard shortcut. And you just kind of brush around. And if it kind of matches. And this is why you really don't want to work non-destructively, because if you do something you don't like, see it did that, I can do a Command Z. You tend to want to work in smaller sections. When it's really close to something, it's kind of reading what's nearby. So it's harder to get those nice smooth edges. So I may actually go from like content aware to proximity match. And this one's going to be a little tougher. Now this is good if you're using sort of larger blemishes. This actually isn't best for removing the wire, like what we're trying to do here. And again, it's just kind of lots of this. And play around with the other settings. Now if we're using this creating texture, you notice it's kind of making this pixely texture, which is a little bit gross, so I may switch around. But the goal is just to remove the wire here now. I'm not expecting it to be perfect, but as you can see, we took sort of this element that was really distracting and removed it. Now we didn't do the best job, but we're learning how to retouch images and remove unsightly objects. So we're going to turn this layer on, File, Save As, first name, last name. And we'll do that for the JPEG. The next we're going to go for the healing brush. So we looked at the spot healing brush, and the healing brush is a little bit different, so we're just going to kind of zoom in. We have this model here that has some zits, and we're going to try to fix them. So we're going to create a brand new layer, and we're going to take the healing brush, which is nestled under the spot healing brush. And you might want to take your brush a little bit lower. Current and below is what we want to take our settings for. We have a couple different modes, so we have the blending modes, we have the source, we're going to do sampled, not patterned, so sampled. We're going to do aligned, so it'll sample pixels continuously without losing the current sampling point. I tend to not do this. And there's diffusion, which controls how quickly it adapts. So in our retouch layer, you're going to hold down Alt or Option on your keyboard. As you can see, it opens up a target. So near where that target hits, it's where it's going to paint. So let's say I hit this, and it's going to take from over there and try to modify it. So it kind of blends it seamlessly by looking at the pattern and what is existing in the nearby. So I'm going to take a target sample, and as you can see, the cursor is filling, and it kind of blends it really nicely. This is one of my more favorite ones. Again, when we're working with skin tone, there's a lot of different values, so I'm going to work on. And you can always kind of toggle off. Now this isn't the best image because it's kind of pixelated, but as you can see, we're removing these blemishes the best we can, and we're just going to try to fix this up. Right here is going to be a little bit more difficult. And it's really just blending it, but you may have to take parts from different areas because there's a lot of gradients with skin tone to kind of fix it up. If your camera sensor is dirty, which I know mine is, this is a good way to kind of clear up those dark gray spots. And if we toggle on and off, you can see before and after. Looks like we did a pretty good job right there. Isn't the best, but we're just trying to learn the practice. And we'll save it as first name, last name, and then healingbrush.psd, and we'll save the JPEG as well. Next we're going to go to the patch tool. We have this image with the slug. And what we're going to do is we're going to kind of remove the bug. So we'll create a brand new layer, and we're going to take the patch tool, which is right here. In our control panel, we make sure we're selecting sample all layers, and we're going to use content aware. We'll keep the structure as 5 and the color as 3. And we're going to take a selection outside this bug. And what it's going to do is not just move it or add it, what it's going to do is actually remove it. So it's going to take, as you can click and drag, I'm still holding, it's going to take that sampled pattern and blend it in that selection, Command D. So once there was a slug, now there's not. Go to File, Save As. First name, last name, patch.jpg, and we'll save it also as a PSD. This is our last one, the clone stamp. So open up the clone stamp, we've got these kitties, and we're going to move this drawer pull because it's actually very distracting. My eye is going here instead of the kitties. So we want to focus on these little kitty cats having fun playing. So we're going to create a brand new layer. And we're going to use the clone stamp, which works a lot like the healing brush, but a little bit different. So it uses the brush. We're going to take our sample current and below and change all these other elements. So like before, it takes a target. What it's really going to do is sort of plant it. So it's really just taking that sample and pasting it. It's not really doing any other elements of blending. And you may want to reset your target as well with the alter option. And I always kind of sample all the way around. Now, I'm going to show you something. So if you sample something weird, it will literally repaste it. So I can paste myself a second kitty cat if I wanted. It's literally taking pixels from somewhere else and copying them. And that's could be good and bad. But what we're going to do is we're just going to try to blend. And I'm taking samples from all around because although it appears to be one color, it's actually not. And just try to remove this drawer pull and say, we don't want it. It's distracting. Now again, it's not going to be the cleanest, but this is actually a lot more pleasing of an image. And you can toggle off and on your layer. So we'll go to File, Save As. First name, last name, clone stamp.psd, and you'll save the same for the JPEG. Now we simply just kind of went through and touched every single one of these elements. We didn't go into too in depth, but we just barely touched them. It's kind of up to you to really explore further and see what else you can do. You can probably find some sample retouch images online if you get really into it to kind of see what you can do to make an image. Maybe there's a tree that's distracting, a model has some acne you want to remove. Really have fun and play around. Think how else you can use this to improve your images, but also remember to work non-destructively. And you'll submit all these files online on campus for a grade, and I hope you had fun playing around. Bye.